Please welcome panel to the stage.
Distinguished guests, Mandela Washington Fellows, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this other session of our conference. As you see from your program, this is a panel discussion that is going to look at our leadership styles and basically looking at Mandela's legacy and how it relates to leadership and our opportunities as the leaders of Africa. I am privileged that this morning I have a great panel in front of you, and we will be able to share some of the lessons that my panelists have relating to leadership. We will also be able to give you an opportunity to ask questions for the panel. So this is going to be a conversation between you, fellows, and our distinguished guests, and the panelists that we have in front of you. My name is Charlene Bangwe. I'm a fellow from Zambia and secretary of the Regional Advisory Board. I'll be leading the discussion this morning. And I am privileged on the panel to have distinguished guests who are leaders in their own right. And like I said, we really have an interactive discussion this morning. The first person I'm introducing is the Managing Director of Stimulus, who also happens to be the First Lady of Namibia. This is Monica Geingos.
I like it.
Thank you for joining us, Madam Geingos.
Thank you.
And on my left, I have Verne Harris. Verne is the Director for Research and Archives at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Then on my far left, I have Bruno Sacatucua from Mozambique. He is a student at the African Leadership Academy. So like I said, this is going to be a very interactive panel discussion, and I would urge all of you to live tweet the session as we discuss issues. And if you feel that these are issues that are very close to your heart and to your leadership journey, let's get the tweets going. We know the MWF con hashtag. Let's use that as often as we can so many more people can learn about the conference and the leadership sessions that we have. I would also like to encourage all the fellows present here to already start preparing the kind of questions you want to ask our panelists as they discuss, because I know that in the morning sessions, the pace has been set, where the discussions we're having are really personal. So if you feel that some of the questions or the topics that are being discussed here are really close to your heart, please jot down and be ready for the question and answer session. So I'll start the discussion by just asking the panelists to just tell us what part of the Mandela legacy affects them, has really attributed to their work as leaders in their rights. I'll start with Madam Geingos.
I was hoping you wouldn't.
I knew it.
I think Mandela has, he's taught a lot to all of us about perseverance, forgiveness, and thinking further than your own pain. But I think if there's something I took from him, is to often, we all take from different people different things. And he becomes different things to different people. And I personally took more about his frailties as a human being, because we have a way of wanting to paint people as if they were perfect. And it's possible for Mandela to have been perfect in some respects and very imperfect in other respects. And I think it's something he struggled with himself. And he constantly asked for people. I remember he had come to Namibia, there was a road named after him. And he specifically said, you know, thank you for the honor, but it's difficult naming roads after people who are alive. Because people can change, people can do things. And I think my learning from him is really, leaders are fallible. If we treat anybody like kings and queens, they'll start behaving like that. And then us who built them to believe they're these gods, when they start acting like gods, we ask them, but who do you think you are? But we made people believe they're bigger than the rest of us. So I think Mandela kept on reminding us, tone it down. I am human, I'm not perfect, and I'm fallible. So that I took a lot of that out of him. And I think it's big of him to say it, because a lot of us get lost in our own self-marketing, and we start to believe it.
Let me just pick up on that before Verne talks about his own vision. You've spoken about humility. Now, I had a discussion with one of the fellows who says that we are constantly on social media, and this morning you explained how we need to be there, we need to be shown with the work that we're doing. And then someone said, if people cannot be humble with the little things that they achieve, for instance, we see people posting on Facebook their lunch, the type of lunch they had, the kind of dresses they're wearing. So if people cannot be humble with small things like that, how will humility work when they achieve bigger things, when they become bigger, when they become more powerful? Maybe you can just say something.
You know, humility, nobody is humble. Let me speak for myself. I try to be humble, because for me, I have to do it consciously, to remind myself to be humble. I think I do have a bit of an ego about me, and I need to often control my ego, because when you make decisions based on ego, that's when you buy a Mercedes-Benz when you should actually be buying a Corolla, because you believe that at my level I should be driving a Mercedes-Benz. So an ego can make you do things that don't make sense. You can avoid conflict if you take your ego out of a situation. Somebody comes shouting at you, and your ego is offended, therefore you start shouting back. But if you take your ego out of the situation and you calm the situation down, you can take a relatively explosive situation and calm it. So I try and manage my ego and not the other way around. So humility to me is a conscious, everyday decision. Not to be humble, but not to think I'm the best at everything. So credit to those who are humble by nature, but I'm not. So because I know I'm not, I manage it.
Thank you so much. Now, Verne, you've been an archivist for Mandela for over 10 years now. So I'm sure you've had experience with a lot of his works. How has that inspired your work?
Well, he gave the institution a very specific mandate, which is to promote his legacy through memory and dialogue. And part of the memory work that we do is around his own life and around his legacy. I think what is fundamental to us as an organization, you can't hear me?
No, they can't hear you. You can check the mic. Can I check if it's on? Test it.
Okay, is that any better? No? Okay, is that any better? No? Got a problem with the mic.
Born before computers.
What about if I speak straight into the thing?
Yes. That's better.
So we have a mandate from Madiba to promote his legacy through memory and dialogue work, and the mandate is a very specific one, to do the difficult work. And in relation to him, and I'm glad you've raised this issue, he said to us, you don't have to protect me, which means we have to do those things that are so hard for us to do, which is to talk about the mistakes he made, both as a human being and as a leader. And what he did with those mistakes is what defined him, in my view, as a great leader. For me, what inspires most is his capacity to endure. That quality of keeping going, mindful that whatever you've done in your life up to this point is always defined by the future that you are making. And that's one of the reasons why he just never stopped working. It was hard to watch because one wanted him to step away, to rest. But he was driven to keep working because there was still work to be done. And of course, there still is work to be done.
Now, Bruno, you are a student at the African Leadership Academy. Of course, you told me in the sidelines that you are hoping to learn a lot from the Mandela Washington Fellows. How has the inspiration from Mandela worked in your own life as a young leader?
Good morning, everyone. Mandela specifically worked in my life with his ability to forgive. It was great. And also his ability to listen. I'm not a forgiving person, and I'm aware of that. A good leader should be aware of his weaknesses, strengths, and everything. A couple of months, as some of you may have read, I was in a conference, African Leadership Model African Union, and I was representing South Africa. It's a conference that we model what happens in African Union. I was South Africa and in SADC Committee, Southern African Development Community. And Swaziland was asking to legalize a specific substance that South Africa would never allow to legalize. And when that happened, everything that I learned in my entrepreneurial leadership class, African studies, and all the values that we cultivate in academy just got blank, and I acted as most of our leaders do. I just said. Don't forget that more than 2/3 of your land are locked by South Africa. If you legalize it, I'm putting you under sanctions. For me at the moment, it was cool because I had the power. Who could go against me? But at the end of the conference, we got an hour to reflect how the conference had gone. And I managed to realize that I was not doing any right. I was not doing any different. As the First Lady, Her Excellency First Lady said before, we often say that person does that, but what do we do ourselves? And I was not doing any right. More than what I've learned in class, that practical lesson taught me, look, empathize a little bit. I was not able to listen to what was the argument, and I was taking decisions based on the power that I was holding. So it was a great lesson for me.
Thank you for that. Now, as you talk about your role as a leader, being in a leadership position and the power it's ignited in you to say certain things, it brings me to my next question on what are the main challenges that Africa is facing now in terms of leadership? I'll start with you, Verne.
That's a very big question. I think that the continent in the last 5 to 10 years has moved profoundly in relation to global structures of power, global processes of power. I think this gives us encouragement. It gives us a sense of hope that the continent can take a position globally that it's been wanting to have for generations. In terms of leadership, when I look at young people, I am inspired. I think that I'm profoundly disadvantaged here this morning. Whether it's South Africa or whether it's Zambia, it doesn't matter where you're looking, is that we have a generation of young people coming through who think of themselves as global citizens, who are passionate about social justice and have the skills that it takes to do amazing things. But somehow we have to get through the next 15 years. And I'm saying this very specifically about South Africa, is that whether you're talking about school principals or hospital superintendents or mayors of towns, is that the quality of leadership is deeply disappointing. And we're looking to our young people to pick up the baton and take us forward.
Thank you, Madam Geingos. Your thoughts on that?
It's a bit difficult to characterize African leadership and say, what are they doing wrong? African leadership is diverse, so it's difficult to characterize it. It's good or it's bad. I think people often say you get the leader you deserve as a country, and who chooses then? It sounds wrong, but we elect our leaders, and we've got a lot of democratic countries. Free and fair elections has become the norm, regular election cycles in the majority of African countries. These are popular leaders. Whether you like them or not, whether you like their policies or not, these are the people chosen by the people of those countries. So it's about self-determination, and leaders react to their people. So if the people are not opposing certain issues, and you see it all over the continent at the moment, where you try and change the constitution, and there's an eruption. You try and do this, there's an eruption. So ultimately, leaders need to be led by the people who elect them. We hold our leaders accountable, and thereby you get the leader you deserve. If you don't hold your leader accountable, you get the leader you deserve. And I've seen a huge improvement in the quality of African leaders. If you look at African leadership from a holistic perspective, and I agree with you, it's not just politicians, it's at all levels. I've seen a fantastic improvement. You are leaders. You are African leaders. You talk about young people being better than the older generation, and I tend to differ a bit. It's like, as a woman saying, if there's a woman in power, therefore women will be empowered. It's possible that a male politician can do more for female empowerment than a younger one. And some young people have actually been disappointing once they get there, because they become exactly like the system they criticize. So to me, leadership is held accountable by those who choose them, whether it's at a private sector level, whether it's at a political level. But the trick is really there must be leaderships at all levels. Traditional leadership, political leadership, economic leadership, in the schools, in the sports fraternities. We can't equate African leadership to just political leadership.
Maybe for you, Bruce, I'll put you on the spot here. I've heard sentiments like Mandela's leadership is outdated. His leadership style is outdated. Would you consider that as a young leader?
Well,
Say that.
me particularly, I'm a history student. I'm a history student, and history is cyclical. It always repeats itself. So there's no such as Mandela's leadership is outdated. Of course, we cannot copy-paste as we've tried to do in many situations. Western democracy, we copy and paste in Mozambique, perhaps. It cannot happen. But with the skills and everything Mandela had to offer South African world, I think we should pick and try to utilize in our own societies. And what's not working is not because it's Mandela's. We should keep pushing. We are going nowhere with that. I think what works, we should do it and try to improve. And what does not work, we just do not use it. But it's not outdated at all.
Thank you for that. Now, what leadership style, then, do we need to adopt now to create and sustain institutions, both in the political scenario and in the entrepreneurship and civil society?
I think you're asking me all the difficult questions. Well, I think if I relate this question to the previous one around Madiba's leadership style and legacy, I think that we need leadership which is inspired, which has vision. Certainly Madiba had that. We also need leadership which is, and it's your point, I think, that is accountable, profoundly accountable. It's interesting that when you read the literature around Madiba, there is a lot of mythology. So he was a leader who was humble and he consulted and there was collective leadership. Well, that's true to a certain extent. But arguably at all the key moments, Madiba took decisions without consultation. And arguably the defining moment in his life as a leader, 1986, when he decided to start talking about talks to the apartheid state from prison, without first consulting with the rest of the leadership. That was the defining moment, and I would argue that this is one of the attributes of a great leader, is knowing when you need to step up to the plate and make decisions like that. But accountability is the kind of the baseline for good leadership, we certainly need to be building those cultures of accountability here in South Africa and elsewhere.
Thank you for that. Now, Madam Geingos, you know that a lot of young people here, even after listening to your speech, we all want your life. We all want the kind of success that you have attained. Now, being a mother, a wife, how have you managed to enter the male-dominated industry of business and sustain your business?
You know, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man or woman is king or queen. Now, I had that fortune. Our country has a significant skill shortage. And I always wondered, how is it if there aren't private equity experts, and I'm the only one, you're going to discriminate against me because there's nobody to choose over me. So I think it's you need to craft your path and make it unique. There's so many highly intelligent, driven, qualified people at the moment on this continent, and I see it in interviews all the time. And you need to find a way to distinguish yourself, and I think I managed to do that quite early on. So I charted a path at that point, which was private equity till now is a relatively new asset class. So when you go into areas where nobody else is, you tend to dominate it easier than if you go into areas where everybody else is. I've got a legal qualification, but I saw very quickly there's so many bright female lawyers in the sector. How do you distinguish yourself? Well, go to private equity because there's nobody there. And then you will distinguish yourself by default. So it's not, so I never, there wasn't a plan. So I didn't have a rigid mindset in terms of where I want to be, what I want to do. But I did have a very clear idea that I want to have an impact wherever I am. And I was just lucky to land up in the area that I landed up in, because it really gave me an eagle's eye over the entire economy, because we invest into different companies that do different things. And so you very quickly start to see where the synergies are at an economic level, and very quickly politicians start to engage you on what do we do from a policy perspective for the country, and very quickly all of that snowballs. So it's about finding a chart and going there, and everything else, children, relationships, none of that is really planned. It kind of hits you unexpected.
I remember the session in the morning where you said that when you can be a perfect mother at one time, and a perfect wife, and a perfect mother as a professional, but you can't do both at the same time. Perfect.
It's not easy.
So that's another way of looking at it. So now we are going to open up for questions from the audience. Do we have questions from the audience? I just need to see where the mics are. Okay, the first question right here, the gentleman in the jacket. Please stand so the mic can come to you.
Thank you. My name is Marlon. I'm from Zimbabwe. My question, there's a school of thought that says, I swear it's on. Okay. So there's a school of thought that says being an African leader it's not for gentle people, but for gentlemen. And there are some people who criticize Mandela's legacy. They say, it's not my position, but some that I've heard from discussions with many of my colleagues. Many young people who say he really didn't achieve much, that there are still poor people in the townships, that the bulk of the wealth of the nation is still within a few individuals with the minority. So there's some people who criticize that and they say, he really didn't achieve much. So I want to ask, maybe to you, Honorable First Lady, that as a person at a position of national leadership, how do you balance the people's expectations, how people have immediate needs, because people are hungry, people are dying now, and then you want to cast a long-term vision where it calls for patience and endurance. How do you balance that out? Thank you.
Context is important. I think when Mandela started what he started in terms of reconciliation and all of those things, that is what this country needed, this country being South Africa. You cannot do anything with a country that's at war. You cannot do anything with a country where there's the kind of division that this country inherited because of apartheid. So I think what he did, those 5 years that he was president, this country needed a president exactly like Mandela. And thereafter, it needed a different kind of leader. It's like the leaders we need in the liberation struggle probably evolve and change to the leaders we need now, given our current context. And that's why it's difficult to answer a question of, is Mandela's leadership style outdated? He served a specific purpose at a certain time. And right now, that time is different. I think inequality is a problem. And often inequality is rooted in, you normally have one or other ethnicity or race that is wealthier than others, that makes others feel excluded. So I think the leadership we need now is a leadership that understands the need to be fair, the need to be transparent, and the need to be inclusive. I think those are the critical types of leadership styles, but also not just talking about it, but doing it and implementing it in policies that actually allow people to escape a poverty cycle. There are people who are born into poverty and who die in poverty. Because the more we move towards a knowledge economy, the more many of our people cannot participate. Because they simply have never had the ability to get the qualifications and the skills in order for them to participate in a knowledge economy. And this knowledge economy is also taking away blue-collar work, which is where many people who cannot participate in that economy are residing. So so we've got an economic system problem, we've got social problems, we've got all kinds of problems that we need to solve at the same time, and time has run out. Because you cannot continue to tell people to be patient. We are going to bring the policies that you need.
Thank you. I'll take another question. I'll take a lady this time. There is one right in front here.
Hi, my name is Zamafuze and I'm from South Africa. I've got 2 questions. Firstly to Verne. Please could you share with us a leadership lesson from Mandela that we could use now in the new dispensation going forward, right? Because it's quite different for us as young leaders. And then to the First Lady, I really want you to please help unpack, because I'm a 30-year-old woman, I'm not married, have no kids, I'm called bossy. So I really want you to really get into helping us understand what does it mean to be a woman who's trying to do things and trying to make a change, right? And what have been your personal sacrifices that you've, had to make? And if you can really pull us in and make it more personal to understand that. Thank you.
You go first.
It's a really good question. Thank you. I think for me, fundamental to Madiba's success as a leader was his discipline. And this expressed itself in daily disciplines of reading, of exercise, of getting up early. But the one that I'll offer you as a lesson which I think has an extraordinary power is Madiba always labored with a pen in hand. He never used a computer, by the way. But he always had a notebook. And when he sat in meetings, he was noting down what everybody was saying. It was quite extraordinary. He came out of prison in 1990, and he kept 3 series of notebooks, one personal, one organizational, ANC, and one family. And we have most of those notebooks. This was a way for someone in his 70s to stay on top of complex processes. And he could drive people completely nuts. I've heard people say, Madiba would come up and say, no, you're saying something different to what you said last week. And when you say no, he pulls out a notebook and he says, no, this is what you said. There's an extraordinary power in record keeping.
What you asked me to do is something I'm reluctant to do, but I've realized, especially with female leadership, there's issues we all grapple with. And I've seen older women grapple with these issues. I've seen white women grapple with the same issues. I've seen female leadership as one group grapple with very similar issues. But what we don't do is what you just asked me to do, and that's to be honest about it. The first issue, which we often don't talk about, is when your income or your ambition exceeds that of your spouse. That is an immediate problem that sucks the air out of the room, because you'll notice one day you'll have a discussion like, we agreed to go somewhere, the kids are in the car, and this person wants to go somewhere else with friends. And you ask the question, you want to sit on my head? No. Where did that come from? So small things will happen. And family and society is also problematic in that. When they know the woman earns more. I know of situations, for instance, where a married woman, they'll call the husband by the wife's maiden surname, basically to insult him. And often that brings problems. But as women, sometimes we are also not sensitive to these issues. I get angry, you had my car, give my car back. It becomes mine. It becomes my money. It becomes, you waving again. It becomes my TV. So sometimes we don't have the maturity as successful women to be sensitive to the male ego. And let's call a spade, that's what it is. Because you need to manage a male ego. But often you can't manage that ego, have children, try and have a career. So personally, I viewed it as too much work. I can only do one thing at a time. And that resulted in the collapse of a long relationship. And it gave me an opportunity to focus on my career. But your career doesn't keep you warm at night. So at a point... So I got happy with where my career was, but later you want to have somebody to talk to at night. You want to relate to somebody else. But I just didn't want to put up with the nonsense that I was seeing many of my female friends putting up because they didn't want to be lonely. So you kind of thought that maybe I should start getting serious, and then somebody comes and cries on your ear and you're like, no, I think I'm fine. and it's to make a conscious decision to say, I will get in a relationship or I'll marry the person who deserves me, who treats me the way I deserve to be treated. So let me confront the elephant in the room. There's a 35-year-old difference between my husband and I, which is huge. And I'm going to tell a personal story because my husband, before he was president, he tried to get this relationship started for a long time. And I castigated him. I called him old. I said, look at your belly. And I was just nasty. And then I pulled the classic move we all pull when you're not interested in an older man and you want to disincentivize him, you start calling him uncle or tate. And my husband looked at me patiently and he said, you know, one day you and I will get married. And he could care less about my insults and the age problem because that's all I could see. But there came a point where we started to talk and engage and relate. And I thought, but this man is my soulmate. And the only thing keeping me from my soulmate is this issue about his age. And I thought that all the things other women are going through and what they're tolerating, and all I have to tolerate is an age difference. What a pleasure. So my husband often warns me against hypocrisy because the one day, and I'll be honest, the Angolan president, Dos Santos, walked in with his wife, and I asked my husband, is that his wife or his daughter? So my husband says, hey, you hypocrite. People ask the same about us. So I think it's really not minding too much what people will say about your decisions and being focused about it and going out in life and getting what you feel you deserve. I think right now you deserve to have a fulfilling career. And if you can't match that with a man who deserves you, then you shouldn't try to. It will come.
Next question from a gentleman. Let me go this side. In red, Velapi.
Hello, good morning. My name is Velapi Mamba from the Kingdom of Swaziland. My question is directed to the First Lady of Namibia. Your soulmate, His Excellency, the President of Namibia, recently declared what he termed as the war on poverty. And my question to you is, do you share this sentiment, and are you ready for this war, especially in the context of a country that we know, first of all, is underpopulated, but the paradox is that it's one of the most unequal societies in the world. And I would love you to hear your views about what the blueprint is in relation to really fighting poverty and making sure that we lift people out of poverty. Thank you.
There's a statistic that is thrown around often about Namibia. It's one of the most unequal in the world. And it's a statistic that us as Namibians need to correct because it's not true. There is inequality in Namibia, and it's racialized. But what our statistics are showing is that we're reducing that gap progressively. We've lifted 500,000 people out of poverty, which is a significant number, considering we're only 2.1 million. So it's racialized. So the 10% white population has most of the economy, prompting questions of, do you have political independence in the absence of economic independence? And there's some truth to that. But the reality is that white population, they are Namibian citizens. They are not foreigners. And it's really a matter of what they have there. We need to find creative ways to redistribute wealth in a way that we can lift people out of poverty, but not make people feel guilty either for being Namibians. So that balance of running a unified country is a challenge. My husband is serious about his war on poverty, and so am I. I think I've always been. As First Lady, what I've tried to do in terms of the programs that I want to focus on is also got a lot to do with poverty alleviation. I was talking about a poverty trap earlier, and it's true in Namibia, it's true in Swaziland, it's true in Angola, it's true in Mozambique, in Zimbabwe. In every single country, there is a poverty trap. There are people who are born into low-income households, and therefore they don't get quality education, because normally the quality education is in the private sector, is in the private education, and it's expensive. So it's not even a racial thing, it's a class issue almost. So once this child from a low-income household doesn't have access to quality healthcare, doesn't have access to quality education, they cannot become participants in the knowledge economy, and there's really nothing the private sector can do for them. So government does have to play a bigger redistributive role. But where do we redistribute from with our small economies? When you look at our government spend, the first thing that really eats up the government budget is the payment of civil servants. And if you look at most African countries' annual budgets, it is the same. And if you do not pay your civil servants, you have chaos. So you end up paying operational costs, expenses on your budget line items, as opposed to capital spend on improving infrastructure, improving the quality of education, improving healthcare. But nobody opposes civil servants. And they are citizens of our countries as well. But they don't realize that their constant need for higher salaries without an increase in productivity is actually keeping our countries back. So as citizens, each and every one of us does things that keeps our countries back. Corruption. There are many people in the past who were liberation heroes who really freed the country. And they're not shy to remind others that, you know, you didn't fight. And they have a point. But when you are corrupt, you are doing bigger damage to your country. So actually, your credentials as a liberation struggle hero become irrelevant when you become corrupt, because you're harming your country. So the discussion that I'm seeing, it's not all the things that government has to do in order to alleviate poverty. I think if we just internalized, if I as a Namibian citizen, and it's probably a global issue, if I could lift one person out of poverty, and I can, I should. And that one person shouldn't be my relative, it shouldn't be my friend, it shouldn't be somebody I know. We must also start taking our responsibility. I think we've lost our humanity to a large extent, and I think this issue of moral leadership, it's something I'm quite reluctant to talk about because it's so subjective. But I think as human beings, we've lost our morality. There was a painting recently sold for 147 million pounds or dollars. And people are free to spend the money the way they want to. But it's a manifestation of a problem with humanity, that there is somebody who can afford to buy a painting for 147 million US dollars with the condition the world is finding itself in today. We've lost our compass.
Lady at the back.
Good morning. My name is Sombo Kaweza from Zambia. My question is to the whole panel. Hopefully someone will pick it up. How do you manage expectations as a leader? I think that one of the reasons why the gentleman was saying people are of the view that people felt let down by Mandela's legacy was because they expected their lives to change right down to the micro level. Same thing, I was with the other fellows at Morgan State University in Baltimore, and we got to see poverty, in those black areas. And then same thing with them was they felt let down, if I could use that word, by Obama, by having a black president, because they thought that their lives would change right down to the type of teaspoon they use. So as a leader, how do you manage those expectations when you get into power?
Do you want to take that up, Verne? You go first. Bruno?
So, I don't really have very high expectations from the society, but I have very high expectations at home with those who pay my fees, who pay my little luxuries and stuff. And it's a constant battle because I always get the line which says, you could do better. But I always hit, what is better? We oftentimes forget to empathize with the person who's wearing the shoes. We take it for granted that if the person is wearing the shoes are comfortable. But what we forget is, how did the person manage to wear the shoes, and what are the shoes doing to the feet of this person? With that, I mean, Mozambique is a Lusophone country. And the institution that I'm studying now, African Leadership Academy, is very high demanding academically, although it's not the only condition to be there. And first term that I was there, my transcript was not what used to be. And the first question that I got is, how so? And I gave us a very simple explanation. Now I'm not only battling with knowledge, with history, geography, and all those things. I'm battling to understand the language. English of communication is not scientific English. English to write an essay and the teacher gives you A. Apart from other components. So I think the best way to manage expectations is to communicate. Communicate for impact. Let the person or the society or whichever other part is expecting from you know. It's very important. And we learn it a lot in our academy. Communicate for impact. Let others know what you're going through. So probably you can get the empathy.
If in the last elections, the political party that my husband represents got 80%, and he got 87% of the vote. And there was high voter turnout. It was a free and fair election. You only see these statistics in elections that are not fair or free. So you can imagine that there's a lot of expectation that he's going to change things. I think, like even some Africans were excited when Obama became president, that he's going to change things. And what people don't understand, an individual gets elected the leader of a system. And you can never manage the expectations of people. People must have high expectations of their leaders, because that puts them under pressure, and it must keep them awake at night to make sure that the people that they delegate their authority to, their ministers, the local authorities, that they are doing their work. So high expectations is not good for a leader because it worries them, but it's good for people to have high expectations of their leaders, because there are compromises that leaders have to make, because they don't come there alone, they come there through political systems. Now, you have allies and enemies even within the political parties that you are. So once you accede to power, you need to kind of make sure that those who supported you to get to this point are taken care of. But sometimes they are not the best implementers of your policy. So you need to utilize that and say, people have a high expectation of me, even if you supported me. It is possible I may need to look at a political enemy within my party and say, this is the best Minister of Education. So as much as we differ on political views or ideological views or religious views or whatever views you have that you want to differ on, we must find a way that we can manage our leadership style where people who are not our friends can also be given responsibilities because it's the best person for the job. And only the high expectation of the population can give a president legitimacy to say, I have to deliver for my people, therefore I need to make difficult political decisions in order to ensure that delivery. So please continue with your high and unrealistic expectations, because it does keep your leaders up at night worrying about it, and it does channel some of their decisions in terms of this may not be politically smart, but it's good for the country. And we must increasingly start thinking about what is good for the country, because you become a leader of everybody, those who voted for you, those who didn't vote for you, those who agree with you, and those who don't.
I think I would make just two very brief points in response to the question. On the one hand, I would argue that a lot of the rage that we see in South African society is rooted in reasonable expectations that have not been met. The other point I would make is that thinking back to the 1990s, and I worked in government right through the period of Madiba's presidency, I think he did seduce us into thinking we could fix things quickly. And if we go back to the late 80s and early 90s, actually our society was so damaged that we knew it would take generations to fix. But too often in the mid-90s, I think we adopted models and strategies that were about the quick fix. And I think we have to be frank about this. There was also an element of arrogance, an element of exceptionalism, where we felt that for South Africa, only the best in the world was acceptable. And we didn't even consider looking at the experiences and the lessons learned in other African countries. We very seldom looked at other countries of the South. And I'll use one example. If you look at our education system today and you ask why it's in such trouble, I would argue it's because in the 90s we defined our transformation agenda in terms of models imported from Canada and Australia. If we had looked at Zimbabwe, if we had looked at Tanzania, I think we'd be in much better shape today.
Thank you. I'm looking for the next question. There, right there in white.
Good morning, panel. My name is Peter Metcalf from the Foundation for the Development of Africa, and you can relax, Verne. This is not a question.
Okay.
A comment based on what the First Lady just mentioned. I would like to just add something, Madam, by saying that the leaders in this room must surround themselves with enablers that will make you look good. Consider that. And then on the issue around alleviating poverty, I have a huge problem with that. You cannot alleviate poverty. You can only create capacity or wealth. We need to get away from that mindset that our people live in poverty. They do. But let's pass the message on as leaders positively. Let's create capacity for our people, not alleviate poverty. Bless you.
Thank you so much. There.
Thank you. I'm from Umtata, so I sort of, every time I go to head office, I drive past Mandela's place. You know, he's from my hometown. He's my homie, for lack of a better word. But I think there's a problem about us and Africans and having a messiah or a big man syndrome, right? And we really think that this man's going to deliver us, you know, get us into Canaan. And I think Moses and Jesus were a very rare amount of people that did that. My issue is, before we talk about Mandela as a president, let's look at him first before that. Look, he was a founder member of the MK, so he was a bit of a rebel rouser. He was about 35, 36 when he was knocking on the door, very close to our age. But look at him, first black lawyer with Oliver Tambo. His wife was the first black social worker. Sobukwe, I think, was close to being one of the first guys to get a PhD or working on one. I don't think they let him finish. But my point is, it's a history of excellence. And my issue now is that if you put that spotlight on some of the crop that we have, I won't mention names, I don't think they're going to make it, you know, with the excellence that they have. And the problem I've got now is that, yeah, let's get to the facts. We're on the outside of this issue. I'm very active politically, I'm very there, but you find that our age group is being told to wait. You know, we're told, nah, you're not ready yet. You shouldn't be there. And I think we define our population as saying 75% of us are under 35. Now, I'm asking, what are we setting ourselves up for if we keep talking about the next leader we're going to have is going to be 75, 86, or whatever his age is? I think their time is up. And when do us now as a youth get given that space to actually lead? Because I think we can take care of the mantle. Because when Mandela came about at that time, he showed he was ready. He didn't just come about. I think it was a long process of excellence. But I think I'm impatient now. I really want to say, when do we get given the chance to run things?
Let me just dispel some mythology there, is that Madiba got a degree, B admin, and then he got a postgraduate diploma, which enabled him to practice as an attorney. But he started studying for his law degree in 1949. He finally got his degree in 1989. And in those 40 years, he failed 35 university courses. It didn't come easily to him. And when we asked him, we interviewed him about this, your results were really bad. Is that because the lecturers were racist? And Madiba's answer was, well, some of them were racist, but that's not why I did badly. And then we said, well, you know, you were so involved in politics and you didn't have time for study. And Madiba said, no, we have to be frank about these things. I was a poor student.
I think the challenge we have often is managing succession, especially from an intergenerational perspective. I think it's unrealistic of people who are not in the structures of political parties at all to expect to be parachuted into top positions, because you work yourself up from section level, from branch level, all the way up to national level. And you'll often notice that the young people who are prepared to do that don't look and sound like you. And so there's a balance there somewhere, firstly. But I think often we fail to manage succession politically. We fail to develop young leaders. And in as much as you can say to somebody, now's not your time, where's the pipe? What is in the pipeline? Are there young people with responsibility in the pipeline who can be built into leadership positions? And I think that's more where the problem is. In Namibia, we had somebody that was regarded as a business icon. And he was 92 years old. And till today, they haven't found, he passed away 2 years ago, and till today they haven't, it's a family business, they haven't found his replacement. And often your legacy isn't while you're alive, it's in death. So even from a private sector person who was regarded as an excellent business brain, he didn't manage his succession. And he compromised his company as a result. And you compromise your country and your party when you don't manage succession. So I think intergenerational succession intentionally is the answer to your question.
Thank you. I'm looking for a lady. The one in pink there.
I'm Anturia Mijay. I'm from Comoros Islands. Well, first, I want to congratulate all the Namibian fellows for having not only such a beautiful First Lady, but an amazing person. I am from a country where when the First Lady doesn't like a minister, he gets removed from the government. In my country, when you want an appointment with the president, you might call his assistant, but you'll never get it if you don't pass through the First Lady. And my question is, I'm sorry if I'm getting too personal, what advice would you give other First Ladies? Like, to what extent should they interfere with their husband's duty in order to have them be more professional or good leaders? Thank you.
That's a difficult question. I think